Well, it's a great day to be learning about marriages. I'm glad you're taking this challenge. Going to be starting right in today on session number 1 for the 6-week marriage challenge. I'm going to start off with talking about belief systems. Don't know about you, but the day that I got married, I had lots of things that I believed that were true, and 33 years later, some of those things really still are true, but a lot of them really aren't. For example, I hope you have your homework downloaded, by the way. If you're looking at it, please get it out and get it out in front of you. There are some things that we believe about marriage that are just fascinating at the very beginning of the relationship. One of those things, as you can see, that we believe that marriage is going to last forever. We don't get married to get divorced. We also believe that our marriages are made in heaven and we want to be in them forever. And we all know that that's not always going to be true. I also believe that, well, actually that's a hope of ours, is it not? We also believe that we have total acceptance from our spouse, that they completely understand us and accept us, and that's just how that is. There's this blissful feeling will last forever is the other part of a relationship. Now, usually, actually, women feel that a little bit more than men. And we also feel that we are in total agreement, that we are together, that we are already one, and we are just beginning that relationship, and that it's going to last that way forever. We believe that we're going to be able to agree all the way through that. And obviously, because love is blind, we feel first with our emotions. Feelings kind of drive the relationship. As you see this box up here that simply says, quite importantly, that relationships are filled with hopes and dreams at the very beginning of every relationship. Emotions play a large role in every relationship. The expectations of having our needs met by our spouse are really high. Actually, I've outlined 2 expectations that are in every relationship, men and women. Women, the need for them is to have love, acceptance, and companionship. The need for men is to have respect, sex, and companionship. Often we believe that sex is the #1 relationship process for a man, but truthfully what we've found out over time is that if love is met first in the woman, going through some very basics of love, we'll define that later, and respect, we'll define that later also, are met in the very first. Well, if respect is met first and love is met first in the relationship for both the man and the woman, conversely, if it's respect for the man and love for the woman, if those things are met first, the other secondary needs, which is acceptance and sex, and of course obviously even companionship at some point, goes down. It's fascinating how that works. Some of that study came from Fieldham. The book's called For Women Only and For Men Only. Very interesting read if you would like to read those 2 things. Something else that's important is that I want us to understand that in a husband and wife team, when God says that we're supposed to be one, or when we become one, really we're supposed to be different. Obviously we know that men or women are a lot different, but we're really supposed to be different. Now, we know that a marriage relationship is built around contracts, and contracts are very important. A marriage is a contract. The way that we view the foundation of contracts come from the way that we are raised by our mom and dad. Whether or not mom and dad stayed married or not, or whether or not mom and dad had a good marriage or not, it really isn't as important as how we experienced what we thought about what that relationship was like. What we experienced in their relationship highly affects the way that we think. Again, we know that an old biblical proverb says that train up a child in the way that he should go and he will not depart from it. That's Proverbs 22:6. Basically what that's saying is this, is that at 18 years old, most children do not believe that their mom and dad know a whole lot about life as a rule. But by the time they're 30, they're a lot more like their mom and dad than they ever thought they're going to be. As we age, the truth about how we are raised or our belief system really begins to show up. Now there's some criteria for that also. Actually what we know is this, is that the first 10 years of a child's life are the most important. Those are called the foundational developmental years. And in those years, all the things that we actually have in our foundational thinking, we call it a construct, is instilled in us in those first 10 years. 11, 12, 13, we begin to try to figure out how to do things on our own, pull away from mom and dad a little bit. But those belief systems are established in us. We know that that's true because a 3-year-old doesn't have a belief system, but they're picking up on experiences and what to think. And by the time we're 10, we've got all those things established in us, and then we begin to figure those out between 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And by the time we're 18, we think we really know how we want to be. And truthfully, what we're really doing is just experiencing how to make the things that we believe be more true for us. Something else I want to point out, it's in the homework here, it's halfway down this page. I'm going to draw a circle around it for you. What we know is true is that between the ages of 0 and 4, now please pay attention to this, these are the most important years of our life as a child, and that is because if there's drama or trauma in those years, if there's something going on that creates a lot of difficulty for us in those early years. Things happen. It gets very difficult for us. Because those are so foundational, someone's had abuse, whether it's physical or emotional or sexual in those lives, in those years rather, or there's been traumatic words said to them, traumatic events going around them. They observe mom and dad being harmful to one another, brother and sister being spanked too harsh, or if they experienced a murder or death or something that was just traumatic for a child. Children might not react to that right away, and they may very well. But what we know is that typically, if there's something traumatic that happens 0 to 4, that it can affect the way we think. Now, why this is important in your marriage relationship is often we try to figure out why we think the way we do or why our spouse feels the way that we do. And often we can't even remember between 0 and 4 anyway. But we know that if something traumatic or dramatic happened back in those years, we have a very difficult time being an adult. And it's just pretty common for that to be true. So I want to encourage you during this process that you be thinking about your past and maybe even asking some questions about what life was like, the way that you were raised. Again, really not looking for any smoking gun in our history, but obviously you're here because you want to have a healthy relationship with your spouse. And the way that we have a healthy relationship is that we understand why we believe the way that we believe. Here's a truth here at the very bottom of this page, and I want to read it to you. It says this, that if an adult is struggling with forgiveness, it's because they did not experience forgiveness as a child. A child who experienced their parents or caregiver harming them and then repenting and truly changing the way that they experienced that child's life, if that child truly saw them repent and ask for forgiveness, then that child actually has a better chance of being a forgiving adult than if the adult that was caring for them harmed them and then never asked for forgiveness. You know, I've heard that old saying, just because I said so. It's really very damaging. It doesn't mean that we don't need to have rules with a child, but forgiveness means when the adult caregiver or the parent harms the child, recognizes that they did wrong, and then truly asks for forgiveness, and then never harms that child again. Again, I want to rather make you aware of that at the very bottom of this page, something that, again, is very important, and that is this, that there's a direct correlation to how you are as an adult right now and the way that you were raised. I'm not going to talk directly about this. Whoops, sorry about that. But I'm going to bring up the fact that shame is brought up in the book by John Bradshaw, as you see there at the bottom of your page. If you want to read about shame, and we want to investigate that a little bit, I would encourage you. Shame is one of those emotions that actually is so foundational, and it causes us to have all kinds of behavior that really is not very healthy for us. We're going to go on just a little bit further here before we take a little bit of a break. There's a box on the left-hand side, and you know, when you think about the fact that we all have behaviors that we wish we weren't doing, the way that you behave actually reveals what you believe. You know, I mean, how you behave is how you believe. And you know, when someone says, "Well, why do you believe that that's true?" I don't know why we believe that's true. For example, when I was growing up, my wife and I had this struggle early on in our relationship, and that was that I had 6 siblings. There's 8 of us, mom and dad, and 6 makes 8. We got up from the dinner table, and by the time we were done, everything was taken care of. The dishes were put away, table was clean, floor was swept, and the kitchen was absolutely spotless. And that's just how that was. In the way that my wife was raised, she was not an only child, but her brother is 7 years older. So there really was a lot of things that happened in their world that was different than ours or mine. And so when we got married, I would come home a year into the relationship, and there's 4 days worth of dishes in the sink, and it was like, what's up with that? You know, it was really difficult for me. And obviously, I wasn't wanting to participate in some of that because I felt like that was her job. That was my own misunderstanding. But we had some difficulties with that early on. And the reason I believe that that was true is because that was the way I experienced it as a child. And that same thing is true of you. If you have experiences in your childhood that you believe is how things should be, those often become the conflict that makes it difficult for the relationship to really do well because we don't have the same raising. We all raised in different families. Again, that box on the left-hand side simply says another very true statement. That is that we learned about marriage by the way we experienced it growing up, not about the way that we were taught. It's the way that we experienced it in our heart. It's what we thought to be true, what we believed to be true. Now, here's another truth, very important. This is a true statement. Marriage relationships are caught, not taught. If you're struggling, maybe there's something along the way that you missed. Think about it a moment. If you're taking this marriage challenge, maybe something about your thinking isn't exactly the way that it should be. Remember, no matter how you feel about it, no matter how we experienced it, no matter what happened, if we're still struggling, it might be that we didn't quite understand something about the way that relationships were really supposed to be. Now, all of God's principles follow these same basic rules. It's much like gravity. There's a constant. Principles are always true. God draws us close to Him in a relationship with Him. It's just true in us learning about how to change the way that we behave. Interesting story in John Eldredge's book about sacred romance. He talks about how God romances us back in a relationship to Him. And always becoming a healthier adult, being able to follow the constructs, the thought process of just being kind and forgiving and non-judgmental and making for allowances for our spouse's difficulties that are difficult, rather our spouse's opposite behaviors that we believe are, maybe I should say it in a different way. It's really difficult for us to accept sometimes behaviors that aren't like we were raised. And God's principles always wants us to begin to think about how we can focus on helping ourselves be different, not change our spouse. We're going to take a break here. We'll be back in just a few minutes. This is page number 4 on session number 1 of the 6-Week Marriage Challenge.